Hello folks, my name is Reverend Crystal Cox, and now we're in June 2024, so I want to tell you what happened with the Obsidian Finance Group versus Crystal Cox case. Again, like I said, we're in 2024. The Ninth Circuit appeal ruling ended in January of 2014. I was living in Port Townsend at the time. The case started in 2011. I was pro se at the lower court level, and then Eugene Volokh, constitutional law professor at UCLA, represented me on my appeal to the Ninth. And as y'all know, so did Marc Randazza and Randazza Legal Group, James DuBois, Ron Green. I fired Randazza Legal Group. This video is how the Obsidian Finance thing came about. I have many videos out there talking about it, but now, it's, I'm, nearly 54 years old. It's, I'm trying not to cry here. For some reason that teared me up, because it's been a long time, right? It's been a long time. And why I'm speaking out about it again now and creating sites, well, first of all, Twitter is now X, and we're not being censored as much, so I can speak up about it. But also, my former attorney, Marc Randazza, has sued me for 12 years. He's went after me in courts, and he won't let up. And so I've decided to archive the story as it really happened, with the truth of how it happened. So, sometime in 2010, I forgot to look it up exactly. At the time, I lived in Eureka, Montana, and I had a real estate company called 10 Lakes Realty. I was the broker owner of that company, and I started my real estate company in 2000, and I was licensed in Oregon and licensed in Montana. And one of the things that we specialized in, because, when you're a rural area real estate company, you kind of wear many hats, so, was 1031 exchanges. Okay, so a 1031 exchange company is an intermediary. So it's a tax thing. So here's what happens. Say you buy a property for $100,000 and you sell it for $1 million. You have a $900,000 tax gain. So what people would do, in order to avoid the tax gain, they would take say they sold it for, they bought it for $100,000, they sold it for $1 million, they'd take that $1 million and put it with a 1031 exchange company while they find a new property. So if they exchange it for a property of like kind, they could avoid the tax. Okay? So now, you could use a private person as an intermediary. There's a lot of different things to it. But lots of people used a company called Summit 1031 Exchange. Now, my company was in Northwest Montana. So Eureka, Montana is in Northwest Montana. You might know like Missoula, Whitefish, Kalispell. Side note there, I was born in Whitefish. I grew up in Eureka, Montana. And Summit 1031 Exchange had offices in Kalispell. So Kalispell was like an hour and 20 minutes from Eureka. We went there all the time. That's where our Northwest MLS was and all our realtor meetings. And so my company used 1031 Summit Exchange for our clients. Okay. So I had started, again, I think it was like, maybe it was like 2009 when they went bankrupt. But I seen an article in the local news that Summit 1031 had went bankrupt. And they had offices in Bend, Oregon, and in Kalispell, Montana. I was licensed in Oregon, licensed in Montana. And so I was like, well, that kind of sucks, right? So as the story went, it seemed like, so they had $40 million of real estate clients, some of my real estate clients, money tied up in the bankruptcy courts. So and it was in the real estate boom, right? Everybody's going crazy, right? You could get no-doc loans, wow. So Summit 1031 got greedy, right? So when the real estate clients, and there, lots of them, put their money with Summit 1031 to then buy real estate again, They had approximately $40 million. They were loaning money to friends. They were buying real estate on speculation because was the crash? Real estate crash around 2008. So they were buying quite a bit of real estate. Well, then we had the real estate crash, right? And so, Summit 1031 had real estate tied up, had money tied up, and they couldn't be liquid to give the money back to the real estate consumer. And so this was an issue. I wasn't pleased with Summit 1031 Exchange. That I was like, why were you guys doing this? Why were you greedy? Why were you spending people's money? Turned out they had like about 35 million of it, but they were short, had these different issues, so they filed for bankruptcy. When they went to file for bankruptcy, some of the big law firms involved, which is why my case got so big, Perkins Coie, which we now know, associated with Hillary Clinton and all that mess, Sussman Shank, we know Michael Sussman and all that trouble. Okay, they were connected with some of the creditors. So they convinced, so first of all, I forget exactly who recommended Kevin Patrick and Obsidian Finance Group to counsel Summit 1031. So Summit 1031 paid them $100,000. I had all the contracts and everything. This is all old news now. I proved it all in court, but for bankruptcy corruption, but Anyway, so they gave them a retainer. Kevin Patrick counseled them on their bankruptcy so that they didn't, they could do things right, do things, legal and be responsible to all the creditors. So Kevin Patrick and Obsidian Finance Group worked for Summit 1031. Okay? Well, then Sussman Shank and Perkins Coie and all these people started buddying up with Kevin, right? And Kevin realized that, I can make a whole lot more money jumping the fence and working with the trustee and being the creditors. So a corrupt judge appointed Kevin Patrick as the trustee. He'd already been on one side of it. Then he went to work on the other side of it because he realized then he could seize all the real estate, seize all the assets, everybody involved, seize their $35 million, and take as many years as he wanted. I think it ended up taking 7 years. And every asset that he sold or whatever money he got 15%. So he stood to make a lot more money working on the opposite side of Summit, even though he'd signed a contract with him. Violation of bankruptcy law. I quoted the law that it violated. I reported on it. Nothing happened. Well, now, as we all know, wink, wink, karma has got Kevin Patrick, and he's no longer here with us. But anyway, this is the story of how Obsidian Finance Group, because it is now a landmark, first of its kind case. This is the origins of it. Okay. So, kind of in the meantime of that, so when Summit first went bankrupt, I was like, complaining about him online. I just did a little blurb because I was in defense of the real estate consumer that had lost their money, their life savings. These weren't big people. I mean, some of them were, but a lot of them were just regular people, right? They had houses that they bought, their inheritance, and they had some sort of gain, and they didn't want to pay the tax on it. So a lot of people, just regular people, lost their money, and a lot of them lost it for years and percentages of it, and lost deals, and many passed away during the process of the liquidation because Kevin Patrick said, no, wasn't a good guy. So, and Obsidian Finance, not good guys. And so, I did a blurb complaining about it, and I, moved on. I was really busy in my real estate. I had offices in Whitefish. I had offices in Oregon. I had offices in, I had like 30 agents. I was very, very busy. So I just put out a little blurb on my blogs. And then I got an email from this man in Bend, Oregon. And he was telling me how horrible Summit 1031 Exchange was. He was telling me who the parties were, the bad and evil, corrupt things they did, and that the daughter of one of the founders of Summit was, which we now know as Stephanie Studebaker. She now goes by something else, but back then she went by Stephanie Studebaker, and then she went by Stephanie Dion later. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. And I kind of lost my thing there. So, anyway, he was her ex-husband. And so he was telling me all kinds of evil stuff about her. And so I posted, and I was complaining about her and her dad and Summit 1031 and what they'd done to the real estate consumer. And my motto on a lot of my blogs was knowledge is power. And so she messaged me and chewed me out. And she said, look, your blogs say knowledge is power. Here's my blog. So she had a blog on the Summit 1031 bankruptcy, and she had hundreds to thousands of documents in the case. She was a CPA. She still is a CPA. I don't think she's not in Bend anymore, but she's still a CPA. So I was like, oh, well, there's a lot more to this story. So I started looking at her documents and realized that Kevin Patrick advised them. And then, kind of reminds you like Marc Randazza, he advised them. He was their attorney. He was helping them with file their bankruptcy. And then he jumped the fence and worked with the opposition to go after his own attorneys. And so I started reporting on it, and Stephanie had done videos of meetings that Kevin had with Summit. Had all these meetings and stuff he had before he jumped sides and was working for the trustee. A violation of bankruptcy law, period, flat. The statute couldn't be clearer. And so I was like, oh, well, yeah, Summit, got greedy, and they're kind of bad guys, but they nearly had all the money. They had something like 35 or 38 million, and they needed 40 million, and they had insurances, and they just needed a little advice. Well, Kevin Patrick put the final nail in the coffin for them to have to go fully bankruptcy, and for the bankruptcy courts to seize everything and really hurt all of these little real estate consumers. And so there was just massive amounts of fraud and fraudulent players and corrupt attorneys, including Sussman Shank and Perkins Coie, and Obsidian Finance Group so it was like, whoa. So I started reporting on it. And I don't know how long I was reporting on it before I was sued. But, I have a certain way that I report, and very flamboyant. I had studied a lot about, SEO, and I knew that, First Amendment rights, and, I called everybody names. I considered myself, my dad was what they called a rock rabbit, so he'd dynamite the rock, and then they'd come in and build the logging roads. And so I kind of likened myself to that. I said, well, I'm the dynamite, right? I come in and blow the road open, and then point them to Stephanie's blog, which is the whistleblower that provided the documents of evidence. And so I didn't expect, don't take her serious, she's not credible. I called people names, I stirred everybody up, and what it did was it created a massive amount of evidence. My stat counter, I could see every single person and company that was involved. I, started to develop this really unique way that I use to this day, 20 years later or whatever, 14 years later, I don't even know. And it created evidence, and it was really clear to me what was going on. So I had hundreds and hundreds to then thousands and thousands of blog posts. I had obsidianfinancesucks.com. I had bankruptcycorruption.com. I had kevinpatrick.blogspot.com. I had, tons of domain names, because, I'd already been in the domain name business. Had like, we had 10,000 domain names. And at that time, you could get them, $3, $5 a piece, and people were selling them anywhere from, 3,000 to millions. I met the man who bought min.com for 100,000, sold it for 1.4 million. I took some courses in Las Vegas regarding all that, and I was really into domain names as the internet real estate. It's kind of changed now. It's different. It wouldn't have if Google hadn't censored everything. Google changed their logarithm because of my case. There's so much I'm going to share with you. I got a new site on Twitter called Obsidian v. Cox, and I will be sharing all of these different things that came from this case. People were stunned, and anyway, so the origins of the Obsidian thing. So Obsidian was kind of ignoring me. Their lawyer was David Aman, Tonkon, Torp, and they were going after Stephanie, but they weren't really saying much to me. They never asked me to retract anything, so no retraction laws. It was pretty obvious, if you had some sort of a brain, who my source was. I mean, I quoted her verbatim. I never hid who my source was. But it wasn't just Stephanie's word, right? I had all the documents, right? I had the contracts with Sussman Shank. I had the stuff with Perkins Coie. I had everybody involved. And then the lawyer that ended up being in the case, federal case, by the way, one of the judges in Portland at the federal case at the time had just left Perkins Coie. So it was all about big corruption. I tended to stumble on these things. I had already stumbled on it in Montana. I don't know if you've seen my videos out there about how I got into investigative blogging and stumbled into 30 years of corruption on some stuff, and that's in other videos I have out there. Just kind of like, hody-do, sticking up for some victim, and then, whoa! So, anywho, so life went on. Obsidian Finance Group, they got a jail sentence for what they did. Kevin seized all the money and all the assets and spent the next 7 years selling them off, and then, there's a bug in here, and getting 15% for each one. And so, then all of a sudden, this one tears me up a little bit, so I'm not going to go into it too much, but Stephanie's father and her husband no longer wanted her talking to me and giving me information. So they convinced the Bend, Oregon police that she was a danger to herself and others. So they committed her. They nearly drugged her to death. I would get messages from the bad guys about how they intended to unalive her. I shouted it from the rooftops. I did everything I could, but nobody was listening to me. I'm not going to tear up here. There's nothing I could do to get her out of that place. I'm not going to name that. I put all that out there before. But it turned out the people who owned the mental facility that locked her up involuntarily, she was handcuffed and taken because they said she was a danger to herself and others. But they were mad because she was talking to me. She wasn't allowed to go to a computer. She wasn't allowed to talk to me. She wasn't allowed to blog any of this stuff. They just shut her down. And I did everything I could to assist her, but I couldn't. And so after, many months, and then racking up her insurance card, because she was a CPA or whatever, and the owners of the facility were connected to Kevin Patrick and connected to Sussman Shank and Perkins Coie, proved all that. But what are you going to do, right? They just silenced and, unalived the whistleblowers. And so she decided, she had a wonderful, raising a wonderful family. She had these amazing, precious sons, and she had to get back to her life. The only way for her to get out was to go back to her husband, because he had signed her in so he could sign her out. So he did. He worked with him. Now, the mental health professionals made her sign a document to get out of a mental facility where she'd been involuntarily committed and nearly drugged to death. First of all, it's mandatory that she take lithium, like for life, and be drug tested. But she had to sign a document that she would not talk to investigative blogger Crystal Cox, which is what I went by at the time. I now go by Reverend Crystal Cox. I'm on a different mission. But, so, I'm a mental health disease. So she signed it and she got out. And then by this time I had moved to Boulder, Colorado. And she messaged me. And she asked and demanded that I take down all of the blogs and information about her husband and her father. And I said no. So she got mad, and you'll see the stuff out there, the internet predator, all the things that she called me because she joined the bad guys, you know, and trying to appease her family. And, you know, this is a long time ago. Life is different on every level now. But this is just the origins of Obsidian Finance versus Cox. So I refused. So she went off on me online, and I didn't retaliate because, you know, I didn't blog about her, I did nothing. But meanwhile, she hooked up with some of, you know, Marc Randazza's buddies and, you know, some of those attorneys out there, people that didn't like me. And so, yeah. So then she calmed down. And she turned around. Like, it was like 6 months later, and she was like, oh, never mind that. So we made up, and we were friends. And I'd never met her at that time. You know, I'd never met her. So here I am in Boulder, Colorado, and it's Christmas Eve in 2010. I had thousands of blog posts, thousands and thousands of blog posts. Now, as I was doing the blog posts, other people were picking me up and taking my story, but they were taking my content and putting it on blogs they owned. They were taking my videos and putting it on their sites. They were, you know, they still do it now. People steal content and they put it out there, okay? Which is part of the reason, I'll explain later, why I needed $2,500 a month in my settlement offer with Obsidian that was later painted out as extortion. There was no way for me to get all of that shut down without attorneys. And so the quotes that I got was $2,500. There was never any extortion. There was never any criminal charges of extortion. Marc Randazza painted that lie, and so did Kevin Patrick's attorney, David Aman. Marc Randazza was my attorney who I fired. Painted that lie to big media that I was guilty of extortion. I was never charged with extortion. People like Kashmir Hill put in the Forbes article that the Oregon Attorney General had complaints about me. No, I got a freedom of information from them. There wasn't even a consumer complaint about me. Reuters, they all lied and defamed me, and I tried to sue them all, but, you know, I was pro se, and I did the best I could. Didn't work out. This stuff's still all out there. So, anyway, I digress. So there I am in Boulder, Colorado, and I get a cease and desist letter from, I think I'll probably do 2 parts to this, or I might clip them together, I don't know. But anyway, look for part 2. So I was in Boulder, Colorado, and would you quit saying that? Okay, I'm just putting this all together. My God, it's like a long time ago. And I'm just blogging away, and I'm doing my thing, and I get a cease and desist letter from Tonkon Torp law firm out of Portland, Oregon, via Kevin Patrick, Obsidian Finance Group's attorney, David Aman. And the cease and desist was basically to shut down all of my sites about Obsidian. It wasn't one certain post, and there was thousands out there. It didn't say this post is inaccurate. It just wanted me to shut down everything that said that Kevin Patrick had committed bankruptcy fraud and tax fraud, and, you know, to shut that all down. Because they'd finally gotten really mad because there was solar credits at that time that Obsidian Finance was getting, like $10 million worth, and they were getting loans, and people didn't want to work with them because of everything they read on the internet that I'd put out there. So they got mad, and they sent me a cease and desist letter. I thought it was really, really funny. Because I was like, well, it's so funny. So I forwarded it to my old friend, Stephanie. And we had a laugh. It was like, ha, 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 this is so funny. And then she messaged me back, and she said some stuff about realized loans and money, and she just kind of did a little recap of some of the stuff that happened with the Obsidian case. You know, from her as a CPA. And we just kind of laughed it off. Okay, so that was in, December. So I went in and I posted her email to me, first time ever, right? I have millions of blog posts out there over decades. It was the first time, perhaps the only time I ever verbatim took information from a source and put it on a blog post. And I did that. And so, and just made fun of them. I'm like, you guys, you know, this stuff's true, and I did that. Okay, so then that was that. So then I ended up going back to Montana, and I went back to Eureka, and I got served with a lawsuit. well, I got, well, you want to hear the gossip of it? Well, I got served at my ex's place, and she's like, rah, 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 rah. And so I'm like, that's my hometown, whatever. So I went down to the police station. I said, hey, you guys want to serve me? And they're like, yeah, okay, yeah. I serve myself, right? So I'm not afraid of this stuff. I've always told the truth. I'm the good guy. I've always been the good guy. Even though demons like Marc Randazza painted me out as the bad guy. Not the bad guy. Like, look at this face. Not the bad guy. True story. Anywho, so then it was a $10 million lawsuit, and it was the exact same wording as the cease and desist. Exactly. Okay? Now remember, the blog post I told you where she sent me the email and I posted that like on Christmas Eve or Christmas Day, 2010. Okay, just kind of remember that. Served with the lawsuit, and the lawsuit is verbatim with the cease and desist. So it says the same exact things, right? Now remembering that when I was served that, I thought, oh, that's funny. They sent it to me via email. And so I sent it to Stephanie, and she sent me an email, and I posted that email that she sent me explaining the Summit case again in different terms, CPA terms. And I'd never done it before, but I posted it verbatim. I didn't like put my own twist to it or anything. And then I made fun of them. And so then when I went back to Montana, so it was like around January 2011, I was served with a $10 million lawsuit that said the same thing as the cease and desist. Remembering again, after the cease and desist was that post that Stephanie sent me. This is important later. And so I didn't answer the complaint. I was like, well, this is crazy. It's $10 million. They don't have a case. I'm not gonna, And so I headed off to Florida. I was working with Good Life International then and selling online supplements. And I went over there and, I was doing business stuff. And then I had been reporting on I View It with Elliot Bernstein. He contacted me online because the I View It technology was stolen primarily through the bankruptcy courts. I had been reporting on bankruptcies, and he found me in the search engines, and he's like, hey, you want to talk about mine too? And I'm like, yeah, sure, that'd be great. So I went and met him, and I'd already been working with him for quite some time, but I went and met him in 2011 after my other business stuff was done. And when I was there, a friend of mine from Eureka, Montana at the time, who was also an anti-corruption guy, he said, my aunt had a judgment like that, or a case like that once, and, if you don't answer, you're going to get a $10 million default judgment, and that's going to, be with you for the rest of your life. And he gave me some case law. He said, give me some pro se ideas to research, and he had given me, before I left, he had given me a whole bunch of stuff on court rules and just pro se, just crash course. And I'm like, I don't want to be pro se. It sounds like a nightmare. There's no. So then once he finally talked me into that, well, I probably should answer. So I answered, my first answer into the case was from Boca the first time I met Elliot. And, and my friend, his name's Stephen Mocco, he gave me, Gertz versus Welch, Times versus Sullivan, a few different case law things that he thought that I should research and study. And so I just kind of went into it. And that's when I first started with the whole pro se thing. And then the judge was like, obviously she's not asserting fact. It's Obsidian Finance sucks. All of her hyperbole and all of her cussing and all of her, she's completely First Amendment protected, And so they're like, the judge is like, there's so many blog posts out there, you guys have to pick some. So they submitted 20 different blog posts as an example to sue me on. And the judge is like, this is out, this is out, this is out, this is out, this is out. And the judge picked one and said, this one blog post we can go to trial for. And that was the one that I had wrote after the cease and desist. So after they already were suing me, right? So it's a whole new cause, right? And so, yeah, I could have said, well, that came from my source. It's nothing to do with me, and get out of it. So I could have also proved that I was a publisher because I had Nakai Publishing at the time. I was also an industry whistleblower because I was a real estate. It was a 1031 company. I was licensed in Montana and Oregon. But I was like, really passionate about my right to report on corruption. There's bad things happening, and I wanted to fight. And so I was like, you know what? I have over 1,000 blogs. I have thousands of domain names. I'm inevitably someday going to be sued. Wait a minute. Who am I kidding? Oh, yeah, who am I kidding? I'd already been sued, right? So was it Realtor? The National Association of Realtors sued me because I had Realtor Sucks. Walmart sued me because I had Walmart Sucks. Even though the site Tobman Sucks was already out there as a case precedence, it kept suing me. I was reporting on local rapes and drugging women with the date rape drug. So a local bar, they sued me. They said, this is not trial by blog. So I was like, whoa. So I got trialbyblog.com. I'm like, that's so cool. So I had already been getting this stuff. And so I'm like, you know what? I'm going to get sued at some point by somebody. We might as well go all the way with this. So I never revealed my source. So even though, so I refused. It's funny. Just another little side note thing. Also at the, that corrupt judge, Marc Randazza in Portland, he ordered that I give him every email that I had with Summit, with Stephanie's dad, with Stephanie, for the last 2 years or whatever. He ordered that I give it to him. And when I went to court, I said, no. And he's like, you didn't bring any of them? Court ordered you to bring it? I'm like, no. Right? Because the shield laws protect me. I have a right to protect my source. I have equal rights to journalists. And the judge's like, no, you don't, because you offered $2,500 in a settlement offer, right? Never got to defend that. I've digressed here on the origins of Obsidian, but which the $2,500 was part of 14 back and forth in the settlement negotiation, was against the rules of evidence to submit, but I didn't know the court rule of the rules of evidence to submit at the time. So instead I was like, well, that's kind of irrelevant. So I made a deal with the opposition's attorney and the judge that I wouldn't testify on my own behalf if they didn't enter in any of the settlement stuff. I didn't know it was against the law for them to do it anyway, but I made that deal, so it didn't come into the case. And then David Aman entered it in the closing statement. And then he gave it to the New York Times. One email, not the full settlement negotiation, which painted me out as extortion. Then my attorney, who I fired, joined Tonkon Torp because he was mad. Marc Randazza went on NPR, went in New York Times, went in Forbes, and told everybody that I had extorted him, right? It's a civil case. I never had any criminal charges. I kept pleading with the judge and pleading with everybody to file criminal charges. I said, I'd file motions, file an FBI investigation. I wanted to litigate it. I had tons of proof that I didn't extort anybody, but instead they just named me as an extortionist. In Marc Randazza, all of his gang stalking attorney friends, then they'd put that in court. The Ninth Circuit, even though I won, they even threw me under the bus and used a New York Times reporter's opinion. She's guilty of extortion. You can, even though you're not supposed to enter anything new, right? Because I was exposing corruption in the dark city of the Rose, which is Perkins Coie and Portland and Sussman Shank and all that. Okay, so where was I in the Obsidian story? Oh, so they picked a blog post. We went to court. Right, so they picked that one, and that what was so funny about it. And so I just went ahead and went through with it. And so I just kind of fell into the pro se stuff. I guess that's kind of it, because I don't really want to talk about the whole case. I'm going to talk about that. Also check out Randazza, Randazza parody on X. I'm going to talk about what Marc Randazza did to me. And my attorney ended up being Eugene Volokh, a UCLA law professor. All these folks believed that I was shady. You know, she's an outlier. She's not like us. I wasn't trying to be like anybody. I'm a Montana girl. I wasn't trying to be any part of any group of bloggers or people. But, my attorney, Marc Randazza, sold the lie to the world that I was guilty of extortion, and I never even had a criminal complaint against me. I never had a chance to defend myself. Reuters defamed me. Kashmir Hill and Forbes, Tracy Conan, a CPA with Mark, I don't remember all the names of Mark's gang stalking law firms, but I will be posting it all. And again, I also started on X, Obsidian v. Cox. If you have any questions, you can email me at reverendcrystalcox@gmail.com. I've been reporting and exposing court corruption for decades. So happy to see what happened in New York, that it's finally being all exposed. Also check out at I View It Theft, IVIEWIT Theft on X. I'm going to bring back all of my different archives and stuff and tell the story about I View It, which is a technology that everybody uses everywhere, every video, medical surgery. Remember when videos used to be pixelated? Well, once that changed, it changed because of I View It technology. And that was Elliot Bernstein and his company. And he's been in that fight for like 30 years. Lockheed Martin, Prosecutor Rose, all these big law firms, defense companies, tech companies, Sony, he had an agreement with Warner Brothers. They all stole his technology and pieced it up. And so I reported on it for over a decade, and I'm going to bring it all back now that we have a platform where we can actually not get our stuff deleted like YouTube's been doing and Google's been doing since I started doing all this, which, you know, again, I started investigative blogging stuff, started first kind of posting on stuff around 2006. There was some rapes and druggings in my hometown and some different, you know, real estate corruption, and I started, that's where I started. Anyway, so check those out, and yeah, I guess that's that. I love you. Bye for now.